Greetings IB artists, I hope you're doing really well. Despite these strange times that we're having at the moment, I thought I would just forge ahead and continue as normal. I know things don't really seem normal right now, but I think the best plan is to just go ahead as if we're already done with it. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about So one of the things that I want to talk about is what does it mean if you decide to go further with your art education? And by that I mean beyond the IB art qualification. So, whether to go to art university, art college, or art school, what does that actually mean? So first of all, you have to decide whether art is for you. Now there are so many different branches of art, and what you get in IB art is a very broad look at the possibilities. It's quite a rigorous course, so it should give you lots and lots of options. So I think that's a very good starting point. So obviously, have you enjoyed it? That's number one. Have you enjoyed the challenges that this course has posed for you? Have you enjoyed solving and overcoming the various problems that you've had to face? Have you established for yourself that you have a real passion for this subject? Do you find yourself at the end of IB art wanting to do more? Wanting to take things further? Are you excited by possibilities for your own work? These are really important questions. And before you let others discourage you, and by others I mean everybody from your friends, your teachers, your parents, or even artists, it's really important to understand that life is generally hard, and there are absolutely no guarantees in life. My way of thinking, and this is only my opinion, is you might as well do something that you really love. I will give you an example of what I mean. When I finished my master's in visual arts, I was teaching art at the time, so I was an art teacher, and the physics teacher came over. He was really excited about, the masters that I'd just finished, and he was asking me lots of questions about it. What was the course like? What was it that you did, etc. And I was happy to answer these questions, but I was wondering, how come you're so interested? It was really surprising to me that he said that he'd always wanted to do art, but that his father had always said, that's not a real job, you're never going to make any money, artists have to suffer for their work, etc. And all those cliches that we hear over and over again. To me, it was really interesting to see someone who was in exactly the same position as me. So for example, we were both teachers at a high school, despite the fact that I did art and he studied physics. So the point that I'm trying to make with the story is that there are really no guarantees in life. Just because you study something sensible doesn't mean that you're going to be hugely successful financially, etc. That's point number one. Point number two is life is very hard, and if you have to go through it doing something that you don't really like or really dislike, it's going to be a lot harder. I'll give you a personal example. So even though teaching art has been a really fulfilling option for me, because I get to share my passion for the subject, I get to witness people's growth and development, it is still a compromise. I would have preferred to have been in a situation where I would have been a full-time artist. Now that hasn't been necessarily possible. It's possibly been also my choice for various reasons, But I have never regretted studying art. And actually one of the best things that I've ever done for myself is having gone back to school to get my master's in art as well. And when I think of myself, I always think of myself as an artist foremost, and then as a teacher. So I think that distinction is really, really important to me. It has kept me sane, it has kept me interested, and I believe it's actually made me a much, much better teacher because I haven't given up my art completely. I'm still a practicing artist. So my point really is, despite the fact that most of you will be warned against doing something in art or studying art or taking art further, I think a lot of people miss out on the fact that if you won't choose to study and to pursue what you really, really love, that will lead to a lot of misery. So even if you're making a really huge fat paycheck, or whatever it is that you deem as successful, if you've got that passion, if that is what you truly feel inspires you and makes your life better, then my advice would be not to underestimate that, because it is really, really important. It's important to choose things that make you feel good, that make you fulfilled, and that make you happy ultimately in the long run, because giving up those things is really, I would say, not worth it. You will grow up, you'll have to make all sorts of sacrifices, you'll have to give up many, many things in order to, function, to look after your loved ones, etc., etc. But I think as much for their sake as your own, I think choose something that makes you happy, because otherwise, you know, it can lead to misery, depression, and resentment. So that's just my point of view. And again, you don't have to listen to me, I'm just one more opinion. I think that you probably know where you stand on that. I always knew that I wanted to do something creative, that I was going to be an artist no matter what. I'm still pursuing that dream, believe it or not, even though I'm, one of the ancient ones now, but I'll only get more ancient, so I might as well pursue it. I have nothing to lose. If you love it, then go for it. It is your life ultimately, and you know whether it's worth fighting for. I mean, if it's not for you, it's not for you, and that's absolutely fine. I will recommend again that you watch The Importance of Being Arty playlist, because I have interviewed quite a few ex-IB students, people who were my IB art students in the past, as well as artists. So that may give you some information on that topic, because one of the questions asks them to discuss the transition to college, so you might find that interesting. So the second question is, should I be going to art school at all? If we assume that you want to do art, that you've decided that this is the life for you, you want to do art, you want to be an artist. So from that point on, do you actually need to go to art school, university, or college? And this is a good question, and I think that it has many, many answers. Just like, in art, things are always more complex. Even when I was interviewing a lot of the artists, a lot of them were very much pro art education, some were very much against art education. So this is important to know that not all artists agree on this anyway. First of all, art is such a vast field. There's so many types of art. There's so many disciplines within art. There's also the two kind of very broad distinctions of commercial art versus fine art. A commercial art would imply that you are interested in design, so everything from fashion to product design to architecture, possibly, if you include that under commercial art. So basically anything where you are creating art for a client or with a client's needs, wants in mind. So you are basically working for somebody versus a fine artist who is working, you know, technically for themselves, but in reality, of course, they also have clients. They either have their collections shown in galleries or collected by museums or art collectors. So the distinctions are blurred in many cases. But primarily, I would say that fine artists work for themselves in the sense that there isn't anyone specifically telling them what to do. And of course this is incredibly basic, a very basic kind of definition of this. For the commercial artist, like we said, it is, you have a brief, you are working towards a brief, you're working towards some kind of outline, if you like. So if we're going along that way of thinking, if you're kind of, reasoning down those lines, then the commercial artists are the ones who really need to perfect their skills. There is no point in having or getting a client who wants this and this and this done, and you're like, well, actually, I don't know how to do that. You can't really do your job that way. So all commercial artists, I would say, are specialized in specific kind of work, whether you're, a car designer, whether you are, designing sportswear. They're very kind of specific tools and techniques and skills that you need. With fine art, you definitely need the skills, but you also, and I'm not saying that, this does not mean that commercial artists don't do this, but you have to be a lot more, for the fine artists, you're a lot more aware of the discourse of art. And the discourse of art is really, a lot of the time, is a conceptual, possibly philosophical pursuit in terms of placing your work within the context of art, whether it's contemporary, whether that contemporary is influenced by a specific kind of trajectory in terms of like art history. It's just kind of you're in a position where you have to place your work against everything else around what you're doing. And for that you need not only the skills and the tools and the techniques, you also need to be aware of what is going on, and not just in terms of technology, etc. Of course you have to do that as well, but in terms of conceptually, what are people thinking of? What are the new concepts? What are the new breakthroughs? What are the influences, or what are the themes in art that are current, that are important? And because fine art is very much preoccupied with placing artists in a specific context, whether it's culturally, whether it's the time context of their work, whether it's a gender context, etc., it in many cases it looks at a much broader picture. with commercial artists, and again, I'm going to get into a lot of trouble because I'm really trying to simplify things and they are not simple. If you are studying architecture, of course you will also have to have that kind of knowledge of what's come before, what are the concerns of contemporary architecture, etc. Just as much as a fashion designer has to also be very aware of what has come before, what are but I would say that, for example, if you're doing fashion, it's a lot more about trend. It's a lot more about having the consumer in mind. Your goal will always be to sell something, which is a very different mindset to, let's say, a fine artist who is addressing something very, something that possibly isn't very commercial in the sense that it's not very sellable, that it's, maybe it's about a very difficult aspect of humanity, or politically it is, it's not decorative in the sense that, oh, that's a pretty picture, I want it on my wall. It comes from a kind of rigorous investigation of your own work, your development, etc. It's just different, but generally speaking, oh my god, this is so much harder than I thought. And again, I will really kind of reiterate the fact that there's a lot of gray areas, because the fashion designer who wants to sell and is looking to sell something that people will want to buy, and therefore is really thinking about that's commercial success, but is also looking at trends, what people want, so what already exists, and creating more of that. They're just as preoccupied as artists with the creativity, the creative kind of aspect of their work, and pushing themselves in new ways and challenging themselves. So the creative process is the creative process in many ways, but I think that possibly maybe a distinction is commercial art has possibly more short-term goals in mind, whereas fine art, you're looking at things perhaps in a deeper way and in a more kind of long-term, with a long-term view of where art is going, where your art will end up in the future. So I think that's a very crude interpretation of commercial art versus fine art. So the original question that we asked was, if you love art, if you've decided to become an artist, do you need to go to art school at all, or art college or art university? It really depends on the art that you want to do. So the type of art that you want to do, you should think about, first of all, what an art education does is it will give you the tools that in order for you to perform the job that you want to perform. So if you're a designer, and you want, you have the option of being self-taught versus going to university. So everything from software, all the right tools, the techniques, you will cover a bit of the history of your discipline. You will look at all the ideas that have come before what is established now, where they've come from. And this is important because a lot of people in art, and I think I heard a writer, an author say this, he was talking about why people who write should read. And can you write without reading lots of books? The problem with not reading lots of books if you want to be an author or a writer is that you may think that you're inventing something amazing and that it's a brand new idea, and then and you just wouldn't know that actually, about, I don't know, 1,000 people have done that same idea, of course in different ways, but the fact that you're kind of ignorant of that is a loss. I mean, it's not good. It's not a good thing. Uh, you 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 lose out on a lot of the wisdom of the people who have done the same thing as you have, in a different way, of course, but a similar thing, let's say, and also you would have, you're also in a position to kind of understand that you're not inventing something new. In fact, everyone says you don't really ever invent anything, everything's recycled. But I think that when you're ignorant, you're just that. You're ignorant of what everybody else is doing. And I think that's a risk that a lot of artists may take as well if they don't study art. Again, there's many, many different artists who are, have not had an art education, but have had amazing careers. But I think most of those people are somehow usually surrounded by other artists who are very kind of serious about their work, and so they learn from them. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. A lot of artists, especially in the past, usually the artists who succeeded were usually in a group of other artists who supported them, who shared ideas with, who challenged them, etc. And of course, that's possibly the best way to learn about art, apart from doing your own work and developing it, of course. But I think that what college does is it provides you with all of that in a very accessible way. So, you go to art college, you immediately have people who know much more than you. You can ask questions. You have a community of people who are also learning, whom you can exchange ideas with. You are learning the tools, the techniques, everything you need to know. It gives you also an opportunity to experiment with those tools. You don't have that pressure that you will have once you're in a position where you have to be professional. So it's a huge advantage. It's a luxury. And I understand that not everyone can afford this. This is, a great, great shame. But I think if you are in a position where you can go to art college, and if you're serious about this, I would highly recommend it. And I've had a quick look before making this video. There's a lot of people who are very negative about it. I understand that especially in the US, it is hugely expensive to go to art school, and you kind of come out of art school and you get into crazy debt, and no one needs that. No one needs that. But again, if you are in a position where you can do that, definitely go for it, because I really think, and it's not just because I'm a teacher, but from my experience, I think that in this day and age, without an education, you are very, very limited.